In the state of the world right now, one of the questions that always crosses the mind of someone who is deciding on where to live is whether to rent or buy. It's a heavy question, and it's one that could have some serious consequences if the wrong answer is chosen. There are several guides out there all promising the right answer to the question of whether to rent or buy. However, there can be misleading information in those articles. And today we're going to cover the basic questions to ask yourself before deciding if you want to rent or buy. These are the things you need to keep in mind before making a new decision. Use these questions to help you make the right financial decision for yourself and the people you love in your life. So today we're going to go over several questions to ask yourself before you rent or buy. Make sure you stick around till the end to hear all the good information. Number 1. Decide how long you want to live in this place. The length of time that you want to stay in one place is one of the more important pieces of information when it comes to deciding whether to rent or buy, and it should certainly be the first question you ask yourself when you're deciding on this decision. Think about whether you are here for a few years, or if you're wanting to plant roots. Obviously, things change, and sometimes you can say you're going to plant roots and then change your mind. However, try not to think of it like that. Instead, focus on the goals you have now and work with those. Ask yourself what kind of plans you have and think about it. If you're young, starting a new job fresh out of college and have no idea what you want to do, renting may be a great option. It'll give you freedom to move around and do what you want when your lease is over, and it'll make your life much easier when you decide you do want to put down roots. However, if you love the town or state you're in, love your job, and could see yourself living there for 5 years or more, it may be a good idea to consider buying. Real estate is an investment, so if you are buying, the smartest thing to do is to ensure that you're actually doing something that can get you money back in the long run. Make sure that if you do buy, you're certain that staying there for a while is what you want to do unless something changes. That should be the first question you ask yourself. Be honest with your answer. Number 2. Estimate the cost of renting versus buying. Keeping a budget in mind when asking yourself about renting versus buying is another huge deal. You have to be certain that you can afford what you're doing. Even if you want to put roots down somewhere but can't afford to buy, then renting may be your only option. Don't forget as well that buying a house often comes with other expenses besides the mortgage. Electric bills, water bills, maintenance for routine housing checks, cleaning supplies, or whether or not you live in an HOA may all be things that would eventually pile onto the cost of a home. That isn't to say that renting could be any cheaper. In some cases, renting can cost just as much as buying a house. Rent, bills, furniture to move in, pet fees, maintenance fees, security deposits, and so much more can hang over the head of a renter. It's important to think about all of these costs before buying or renting. Before you do either option, lay out a budget for yourself and figure out what you can comfortably spend per month at any desired location. Then, present this to your real estate agent and let them know what you're working with, where your hard line is, and what you want. That way, they know what they're working with and can find the perfect place for you that suits your needs. Remember, paying to live somewhere is going to almost certainly be one of the most important things on this list. Before you rent or buy, the best thing to ask yourself is if you can even afford it. Number 3. Do you want mobility or roots? Just like our first question, you need to ask yourself about your lifestyle choices. Are you someone who likes to pick up and leave at any point, ready to adventure and go elsewhere? Or are you someone who wants to find the perfect town to raise a family? This may seem like an easy question, but you really need to think hard on this to ensure the maximum happiness with your purchases and whether or not you'll make the right decisions. Think of how you want your future to look like and what you want to see in this future. Do you want to start a family or get married? Where do you see yourself in 20 years? Obviously, the way that you answer this will change how you proceed with what you buy. While renting has leases, meaning you can't just up and leave at any moment, you can get someone to pick up your lease or break it and cover the cost. You can always leave a rental if you need to. It's not that simple with a house. You'd have to sell it, deal with closing costs, and all sorts of other things. Remember to keep this in mind when you decide what you want to do. If you're loving this video, Then make sure to subscribe and leave a comment saying, "I subscribed," and we will personally reply to your comment. Number 4, weigh the risks. When you're deciding if you want to rent or buy, one of the questions you need to consider is the risks of each. While each version has benefits, obviously there are some issues that can arise from renting or buying. Both options have benefits and consequences. When renting, you have the benefits of low closing costs, a landlord that pays for maintenance fees in most cases, mobility, lack of fluctuating housing costs, and the ability to test drive where you want to live. That goes hand in hand with mobility, of course, but it's important to remember that there are negatives to both options. For instance, if you're renting, you have a limited ability to customize your space. You aren't building any equity, and at the end of the day, your landlord could decide to sell or just stop renting out to tenants. That, of course, is a worst-case scenario, but sometimes it's the reality for some tenants of an apartment. It isn't exactly sunshine and roses for homeowners either. For a home, the benefits usually tend to revolve around money. Over time, you would build equity. Your house could appreciate in value. You may find yourself enjoying tax benefits, and at the end of the day, no one should be able to kick you out of your house. That gives a sense of stability. However, if you buy a home, you lose the ability to move around freely. You may find that your house could actually depreciate in value, and closing costs or even simply the cost to move away may be more than you expected. Before you decide between renting and buying, weigh the risks of each. Would you prefer stability and the chance for an investment at the risk of losing money? Or would you rather have the freedom to move around at the risk of losing your apartment due to a leaving landlord? Reflect on these choices to ensure that you make the right decision when it comes to buying or renting. Number 5, assess your financial situation. This may seem straightforward and almost a kind of a duh question to ask yourself before you decide whether to buy or not, but it can become easy to get caught up in the whirlwind life of buying, renting, looking at paid samples and Pinterest boards about decorating, and neglecting the important thing: money. Obviously, if you're deciding to buy or rent, the financial situation is normally handled beforehand. You probably wouldn't have moved out on your own or with your family into a place to rent or buy if you didn't know that on some level you could afford it. However, it's important to remember that it's not just mortgage or rent. It's safety deposits and lawn care fees. It's pet deposits and HOA fees. There are bills and other kinds of payments that you'll have to pay no matter where you go. That's why it's extremely important to assess your financial situation before moving anywhere. If you're barely able to afford the mortgage of the home you want to secure, think about downsizing or renting, because there will be surprise costs that you'll be forced to deal with whether you like it or not. The same goes for renting. If you can barely make the rent in a certain city, consider renting elsewhere for a bit until you can move closer. It's always better to save a bit more and put that money aside and let it accumulate over time than to overspend and find yourself stuck in a situation that you can't pay for. Number 6, consider the rules. The final question to ask yourself is whether the rules of where you want to live fit your lifestyle or not. Do you want a lot of land to run around with your big dogs on? Well, an apartment is probably not the best fit for you. Are you okay with being a quiet and considerate tenant who won't play loud music at 2 in the morning? An apartment may be exactly where you want to go. The rules for every place differ. If you're buying, you may have to answer to an HOA, while renters have to listen to a landlord or an angry neighbor. Essentially, if you're a drummer in a heavy metal band, it may be in your best interest to consider not moving into an apartment. And if you found this video useful, then you'll love these. And make sure to subscribe and leave a comment saying, "I subscribed," and we will personally reply to your comment.